This is the first video for importing data into Genesis. Video 1 will focus on actualizing the importation process, and Video 2 will focus on ensuring the data has been correctly imported. There are three main ways to import geological information into Genesis. The first is through the use of flat files, of which the most common example is a CSV file or a comma delimited file. Secondly, through a file created by GeoBase. GeoBase is a commercial database available through SGS and can be bundled with Genesis. It serves as both an in-field logger utility and as a means to keep geological data together. The database file from GeoBase can be directly imported into Genesis, which streamlines the importation process. And thirdly, a file created by GeoTickLog. GeoTickLog is another commercially available logger utility. When importing into Genesis with flat files, it is absolutely necessary to have a callers file. All of the other files are linked together by the information available in the callers file. Once you have an accurate callers table, you can import assays, lithological logs, deviations, structures, and other information associated to the holes in your callers file. Okay, I'm going to open up a CSV file. It's in my flat files directory. I'm going to open up both callers and assays. I have my CSV files set to open default in Microsoft Excel. You can open them with any text editor. Okay, so my callers file, which is the first and foremost for importing to Genesis, has 7 main headers in the header row. These are whole name, easting, northing, elevation, azimuth, dip, and length, and they are absolutely essential for the importation process. Okay, in this particular callers file, you can see I have 92 holes, all titled hole-01 through 92. All right, now let's take a look at my assays table side by side with our callers table. And you can see that in my assays table, I have the whole name written identical to how it is written in the callers table. For instance, hole-09 has the same case and spelling in both tables. This is critical. You can see that this assay table is fairly basic. I only have one element here, copper. I have a from, to, sample number, length, copper, and certificate number. All right, that is all I really wanted to illustrate for now about CSV files, is that they are simple, comma delimited files that have a headers row and then the data in each row afterwards. Now that we are familiar with our flat files, let us import them into Genesis. We can start up either Genesis or Genesis 64 for this task. I will open up the Genesis 64-bit on my desktop. Now that Genesis is open, you can notice that on the top of the screen it says Untitled Genesis. This is because we have not made a file yet. We can click on the Genesis cube in the top left corner and then select New. Now we can choose a name for our file and save it to a working folder. I will name this file Demo Flat File, and I'm going to save it to a folder on my desktop called Importing Files. Save. Okay, we have a proper file set up. Before we import the data, we have one more task. We need to create a variable for our copper assays. If we do not define this variable first, we cannot import our flat files. We will select Option from the ribbon. Then from the Settings panel, we will select Schema and Colors. Notice a tabbed dialog box appears. Conveniently, the first tab is Variable, and we need not go any further. There are multiple settings, but for the time being, let's take the default values and add our copper variable. Let's click Add. we will type in capital C small u into the new variable dialog box. Click OK. We chose to type in capital C small u for copper to match the value written in our assays file. Now that we have successfully created our variable, let's click OK one more time to close the Schema Settings window. We will go back to the main ribbon by clicking Home on the ribbon. Select the Whole Data panel, our whole data, Import from Flat Files. We get a new dialog box that appears. Notice the callers row is in red. That is the absolute bare minimum we need to import. So we'll click on that row, and we're gonna click on the triple ellipses here, and it will tell us to open up a file. So I have them already in a folder called Flat Files, and I have assays, callers, deviations, lithology, structures. I'm going to click on the callers.csv and open. Now I'm going to put in my deviations file. I'm going to put in my assays file. And lithology. Now this is a lithological log. This is not actually the dictionary of lithologies. So for each hole we have from, to, depths, and lithologies. I'm going to put in one last file. I'm going to put in a structures file. Okay, so now I have 5 files loaded here, and I'm going to click the OK button, and it's going to start importing. So a new dialog box appears. Okay, this is for our first hole, or our first file, and it's our callers file. You can see up in the top we have a window that displays the information from the callers file. And the top is the header, hole name, easting, northing, elevation, and then below is the data. We're going to click on first line contains column titles because our file contains a header row. Then we're going to click on the radio button by name because we're going to import each piece of data in by name. The field name required by Genesis matched with the column name from our CSV file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll through each of these to make sure that the proper field name and column name are matching up. And they do. I will click OK. I'm going to repeat this process for each file that we're loading. First line contains column titles by name, and I'm going to check. Okay. Genesis is importing that information. And as it completes a new file, then the new dialog box will come up. This one is for assays. You can see that we have whole name, from, to, sample, length, copper, certificate. Okay. First line contains column titles by name. Verify that this is all working. Then Genesis will load. Do the next for this is our lithology file. We have whole name, from, to, level, summary, and description. Do it by name and check. Yes, the correct information is loading in the correct spot. This is for our structures. Okay. Check through that as well. Click OK. Now, after all of our data has been imported, we get a data importation window. This is a very useful window. It tells us exactly what has been loaded. So for this demonstration, we have 92 holes, 5,481 deviations. Now note, it says deviations are loaded or calculated. Genesis calculates deviations. So if you load 0 deviations, it might calculate X many deviations for the beginning and end of your hole based from your callers table. It'll also try to smooth some deviations and add points in between. 1,605 assays are loaded, 200 lithologies, 0 RQDs. Of course, we didn't add any RQD files, 0 geochemistry, 0 alterations, 0 mineralizations, and 4 structures are loaded. Okay, At this point in time, if we had an error, we would get an error log that would come up. Fortunately for us, we have no error logs, and you can see that Genesis has created drill hole traces. And we are going to end this portion of the instruction right now by saving, clicking on the blue disk on our quick access toolbar. Genesis has completed saving its file, and that concludes this portion of the demonstration.